Hare Krishna. So today we will discuss Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 in summary. And this chapter is entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. So this chapter covers the 5 main topics of Bhagavad Gita. That is the Atma, the soul or the Jiva, and also the Paramatma, the Supreme Lord. It also talks about Karma, the law of action and reaction, and then Kala, which comes in the form of death, and finally material nature or Prakriti as well. So in the last chapter, we discussed that the acronym doubt, that how Arjuna was so confused, he didn't know what to do, what is right, should I fight, should I not fight? And he gave multiple reasons for not fighting, which were quite sensible, but they were based on the bodily level. And ultimately, what was the conclusion? By trying to understand through one's own intelligence, through one's own ability, Arjuna was crying, the Gandiva was shaking, and finally he gave up the battle, desiring not to fight. So this chapter also opens up from the same point, and we will try to understand this chapter through the medium of an acronym called Gītā, G-I-T-A. So the first 7 verses, the first 10 verses talk about Guru, the G for Guru. Arjuna gives some more reasons in the beginning few verses that how he does not want to fight, rather he wants to maybe retire or go to the forest. But ultimately the outcome is confusion. So in text number 7, Arjuna says, Karpanya dosho pahat swabhava prichhami tvam dharma sammuda cheta yat shreyasya nishchitam bruhi tanme Shishyastimam shadimam tvam praparnam. O my Lord, I do not know what is right for me, what is wrong. Now I surrender unto you as a student, as a disciple. Now you guide me what is ultimately beneficial for me. Now you tell me about Shreyas. There are 2 aspects. One is Shreyas, that means long-term, eternal benefit. I do not want any short-term thing, my dear Lord, my dear Guru. I want long-term. The people who aspire for short-term gains end up in long-term suffering. The people who aspire for long-term gains, even though in the beginning, short-term, it may be a little difficult, but ultimately they will be much more happy and successful. So Arjuna surrenders. That's the first 10 verses to the spiritual master, and that is, my dear friends, the solution to cross over the confusion in life, the doubt in life. We cannot just fix everything on our own. We need superior guidance. We need help through a bona fide spiritual master. And that's what Arjuna is teaching through his example. The next I is for identity. So the verse number 11 to 30 in this chapter talk about the identity, because that's the fundamental question of life which everyone should have. Who am I? And what is my real identity? We are not this body. This body is just a covering, like the parrot and the cage. The cage is the covering for the parrot, but that's not the real identity of the parrot. So we should not just try to decorate the cage, but we should focus on the parrot inside. So similarly, the real self is the Atma or the soul. That is the true self. And the body is like a cage. Another way to understand the same point is through the car and the driver. The car is the medium, but the driver is what runs the car. Without the medium of the driver, the car is just a dead object. So we can understand that even in this lifetime, what I am looking now, my body has changed over the period of years. My childhood body was different from my current body. And we can, feel that even in this lifetime, our body, the color of our skin, the wrinkles, the face, the height and weight keeps changing. But am I changing? No. And that's what Krishna is explaining in multiple verses. Approximately around 20 verses, Krishna talks about this, that the soul cannot be destroyed by any weapons. The soul is eternal, but the body is temporary. The body is born and the body is dead at a certain point, whether it is 70 years, 80 years, 100 years, etc. So one should try to understand our true self, and that is not the body, but we are the eternal spirit souls. And Krishna also talks about that we must tolerate. We must tolerate the dualities of life. Ups and downs come in everyone's life, whether we are rich or poor, black or white, American or Indian, literate or illiterate. That does not matter, because all these are bodily designations. People are fighting over these designations, over religion, over the color of the skin, over the color of their different aspects of life, that I am better than you. All these are bodily designations. But when someone truly understands that I am the spirit soul, that's actually a way to tolerate the ups and downs in life and be happy and develop the principle of universal brotherhood as well. Then Krishna talks about the T of two duties. From text number 31 to text number 53, or till text number 53, Krishna talks about two duties. One is the Swadharma, referring to our conditional duties. We all have some condition. Someone could be a student, someone could be a housewife, someone could be a businessman, someone could be a politician, someone could be a leader, someone could be an employee. So based on our conditions, our conditional duties change. A student has some duties to study. A soldier in the army has duty to fight in the battle. A housewife has duties to take care of the family, children, home. So the conditions determine our conditional duty, the Swadharma. But there is another important, rather more important duty. It's called Sanatan Dharma, the constitutional duties. The constitutional duties are eternal duties. They don't change. They don't change based on situations. They don't change based on conditions. Whether one is a student, whether one is a male or female, Indian or American, boy or girl, the constitutional duties remain the same. And what are those duties? Those duties are service to God, service to Lord Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's what Krishna is teaching. In the first set of verses from 31 to 37, Krishna talks about Sakama Karma Yoga. That means attached work. And then Krishna talks about Nishkama Karma Yoga. That means detached work, from 38 to 53. That how, if someone is executing one's duty, whether it is office or as a businessman or as a student, but keeping the constitutional duties as the center. That my job is not just for my own selfish endeavors. It is a way to express my devotion to God. So I must do it dutifully, and I must share some results out of it, or the complete results out of it, as a service to Lord. Same as my family is not just my family. My home is not just my home. It is a blessing of God. So I must use it in that way. That is basically called Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna also mentions, and that person is not bewildered by the changes of life, by the ups and downs, by the heat and cold. And that's called being equipoised. Such person is resolute. Krishna says that one should be resolute on one's path. If we are not disturbed by the ups and downs, if we are focused on the path of spiritual life, Bhakti Yoga, and that has eternal gains, even little service, even little progress on this path can save one from the greatest dangers. That's Krishna's assurance. The Supreme God is assuring that. Therefore, we must engage in the process of Bhakti Yoga, and that will lead to being equipoised. We will not be able to, will not be bewildered by the changes of this world, by the dualities of this world. And such a person does not get any karma, or such a person becomes free from the bondages of karma. And that's how Krishna is refuting all the arguments of Arjuna, because Arjuna initially said, hey, if I kill them, then I'll get bad karma, I'll go to hell, etc. So Krishna is saying, you act like a soldier on the behalf of the government. When the soldier acts on the behalf of the government and kills the opponents on the battlefield, that soldier does not get punished. Rather, if a civilian is killed by an ordinary man. If someone shoots a civilian in the middle of the street, that person will be put behind bars, because that ordinary person, a civilian, was killed because of his or her own whims and fantasies, without taking guidance from the Guru. So Krishna is basically telling Arjuna that you must fight and give up all these false reasonings. Work on the principle of identity, work on the higher principles. And then finally, Arjuna asked this question from text number 54, and that's the last part, A for Atmaram. What are the symptoms of Atmaram, of a self-realized soul? How does he walk? How does he talk? How does he sit? Basically asking, how does he react to situations in life? How does he control his or her senses? So that's a great question by Arjuna from text number 54 to 72, Atmaram, the A for Atmaram, or as advanced spiritualist. And then Krishna replies to the question of Arjuna that such a person is not bewildered by changes, by heat or cold, and he gives up the dualities like up and down, happiness or distress. He is not disturbed, good or bad. That person is completely equipoised. And then Krishna also talks about sense control. It is very, very important in life to be sense controlled. And Krishna gives multiple analogies to express that point. The analogy of the boat, the analogy of the winds, the analogy of the tortoise, that how a tortoise, when it's in danger or when it's in an unfavorable environment, the tortoise pulls the senses within. So therefore stays protected. Therefore we should be careful and withdraw our senses when there is unfavorable, when we don't have to use our senses. And then Krishna talks about how contemplation on sense objects leads to more desires, leads to lust, followed by anger, and ultimately it leads to bewilderment of memory. Intelligence is lost, and then one finally falls down. Two very important verses in chapter 2, 62 and 63, that how one falls down. It all starts with contemplation on sense objects. So we must carefully guard our senses. We must guard our senses by having higher intelligence. Because by having higher intelligence, the mind will be stable, it will lead to peace, and that will lead to happiness. If one's mind is not controlled, if one is not nourishing oneself with high intelligence, then one will be lost. And finally, Krishna concludes this chapter by mentioning that how, if we follow the two duties, that is the Swadharma, the conditional duties, keeping the Sanatan Dharma, or the constitutional duties, that is the devotion to God, no matter what our conditions may be in, no matter whatever place we may be in, we have to always keep the constitutional duties, which is the service to God, as the center, and that in that way, aligning both the conditional and the constitutional duties, one will not be bewildered, one will be free from all the dualities of life, one will be sense controlled, one will make steady spiritual progress, and in that way that person will go back home, back to Godhead, in the kingdom of God, which is full of eternity and bliss and knowledge. So to conclude chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita with an acronym, Gītā. The first 10 verses talk about the Guru, that how we need to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master who tells us about our true identity, that's the I, and then we can understand who we really are. I'm not this body, I'm the spirit soul, an eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. And also we will become free from the dualities by following the two duties, that's the T of two duties, conditional and constitutional duties, and gradually making spiritual progress to do our duties in a very detached way and keeping the attachment to the Supreme Lord as the center. And finally, we will become Atmarama. That means self-realized, and one will be able to explore that journey within. One will be free from all doubts and dualities. One will be self-realized. One will become sense-controlled, following the process of Bhakti Yoga or the Sanatan Dharma. And that's the end of chapter 2. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.